British Vogue just dropped its very first Best Dressed list, and with one smooth, almost effortless move, it sent a message that echoed far beyond fashion. Sitting confidently at the very top was the Princess of Wales composed, unbothered, front row presence without ever needing to announce it. But the real moment that made people stop scrolling came right after, when Vogue unveiled a second list spotlighting 55 cultural tastemakers shaping the moment, actors, designers, musicians, industry insiders, all neatly placed in their lanes. And yet, one name many expected to see was nowhere to be found: Meghan Markle. No ranking, no side note, not even a whisper. And when Vogue goes quiet, that quiet is intentional. In fashion, silence hits harder than criticism. It's not a door slamming, it's a door closing gently. And that's how real power operates. This wasn't about dresses, heels, or color choices. Vogue made it clear they weren't judging outfits. They were measuring presence, influence, the kind that doesn't chase relevance or demand attention because it already has it. In this world, true style isn't loud, it's controlled, confident, and restrained. Vogue doesn't reward noise, it rewards authority that doesn't need explaining. And once you see it that way, the list stops feeling like fashion commentary and starts reading like a quiet map of power: who's still invited, who's still trusted, and who no longer fits the room. And then there was Catherine, not merely included, but unmistakably crowned, because Vogue didn't just place her at the top of the list. They gave her a title that carries permanence, calling her an eternal influencer, a distinction that isn't about trends, but longevity. She was positioned alongside figures who never had to chase relevance because they created it, names like Kate Moss, Naomi Campbell, and Victoria Beckham. Icons whose influence never needed rebranding. Vogue highlighted Catherine's appreciation for vintage fashion, her consistent support of British designers, and her almost effortless ability to change a brand's fortunes with a single appearance, all achieved without press tours, public statements, or grand declarations. Just quiet consistency. They even noted that her influence is expected to grow as she steps further into the role of issuing royal warrants, which in simple terms means her presence doesn't just move fashion, it moves money steadily and inevitably. That's where the contrast became impossible to ignore, because while one woman rose without asking, another wasn't acknowledged at all. And suddenly this stopped being a fashion story and became a lesson in how power actually works. Catherine's placement wasn't symbolic or emotional, it was economic, because what insiders call the Kate effect is a measurable force, with brands selling out within hours and designers seeing spikes that can be traced directly to a single appearance, an impact estimated in the billions. Vogue understands this language clearly. They don't elevate people because they're popular. They do it because they move systems. And Catherine doesn't chase fashion houses. Fashion houses quietly wait for her nod, made even more powerful by what she doesn't do. No chaos, no drama, no overexposure, just restraint, consistency, and trust. From Vogue's point of view, this was never just about fashion, it was about stability, because stability is what decides who earns lasting influence and who slowly fades out of the picture. That's why the second list matters so much. 55 names, each one deliberately chosen and clearly defined. Amal Clooney was praised for committing to a signature look. Musicians were recognized for shaping both sound and style. Actors were celebrated for their confidence and eccentricity. Even the men had their own clearly marked lane. And everyone on that list had a reason for being there. Everyone except Meghan. This wasn't an oversight because Vogue doesn't forget figures of her stature. It was exclusion, a quiet signal that her lane is no longer clear. In elite circles, lists like this aren't popularity contests. They're definitions of relevance, asking who you are right now, what you represent, and whether what you bring still lasts. And Vogue didn't explain her absence because silence is how institutions speak when the decision is already made. Uncomfortable as it may be, whatever Meghan represents at this stage, Vogue no longer sees it as cultural authority, and that's where the quiet rejection sharpened. According to sources close to the situation, Meghan didn't wait for an invitation back into Vogue's pages. She reached out herself. But what arrived wasn't a simple pitch, it was a list of conditions. A full feature, prime placement, creative control, and approval over images, quotes, and narrative, turning collaboration into command. That's where the line was drawn, because while Vogue works with powerful women all the time, one rule rarely bends: the magazine controls the story. Even global icons don't dictate editorial authority. Insiders say the request raised eyebrows, not for its ambition, but for its tone, which felt less like confidence and more like entitlement. And Vogue isn't in the business of rehabilitating images or rescuing reputations. It protects its own standing. So when faced with a polarizing figure demanding control instead of trust, Vogue responded the way it always does in moments like this, by stepping back and letting silence deliver the message. It started with a no so quiet it barely made a sound. Yet in the fashion world, a polite decline carries more weight than a public rejection, because it signals something far more serious: access being gently withdrawn. There was a time when Meghan's presence felt intriguing, fresh, and slightly untouchable, but mystique is fragile, and once it fades, it rarely returns. In elite fashion and media circles, overexposure isn't visibility, it's erosion. Because the more audiences hear the same explanations and carefully managed narratives, the less power those messages hold. Vogue thrives on distance, on unanswered questions, on allowing an image to breathe, and somewhere along the way, Meghan's story stopped breathing. Every appearance felt calculated, every smile rehearsed, every moment designed to say something instead of simply being something. And fashion doesn't reward effort you can see, it rewards effort you never notice. When mystery turns into predictability, even the most influential platforms instinctively step back. Leaving the royal family was meant to open doors to freedom, opportunity, and reinvention, but instead it revealed a harder truth about how much influence had been woven into the institution itself. Outside the palace walls, the safety net vanished. Media deals promised a reset but delivered mixed results, and projects launched with global anticipation quietly faded without the lasting impact many expected. Behind the scenes, relationships cooled, invitations slowed, and support became conditional, exposing an uncomfortable reality. The authority Meghan once carried didn't exist in isolation, it flowed through proximity to the crown. Without it, every move required more effort for less return, and while freedom did arrive, so did isolation, and in industries built on stability and trust, isolation is not a strength, it's a risk. This is where the story goes beyond dresses, red carpets, and glossy covers, and dives into something far deeper. Attention is loud. It trends, spikes, disappears, but favor is quiet. It doesn't announce itself, yet it quietly decides outcomes. Institutions don't chase attention, they protect favor, and that's why silence from Vogue matters. That's why the monarchy never rushes to respond. True power doesn't argue. It waits. Catherine's influence grows because it moves in sync with systems that act slowly, deliberately, and with purpose. Meghan's struggle isn't about talent or ambition, it's about positioning. Step into conflict with the very structures that elevated you, and attention might follow, but favor does not. Without favor, doors don't slam, they simply stop opening. At its core, this isn't a story about who wore what. It's about two paths and the very different outcomes they led to. One woman learned patience, to listen, to let institutions speak on her behalf. She didn't chase relevance, she became inevitable. The other pushed forward, demanded space, demanded control, demanded to be heard, and learned that power doesn't respond kindly to pressure. Vogue didn't have to choose loudly. It crowned one quietly and passed on the other without a word. That decision speaks louder than any headline ever could, because influence doesn't vanish overnight. It shifts, settles, and chooses where it wants to live. Right now, it's clear where it feels most at home. This isn't an ending. It's a pause, a recalibration, and the real question isn't who Vogue crowned this time. It's who will rise next.